Hello everyone, I'm Ling from Huawei Global Training Center. Today we are going to learn the MapReduce and YANG technical principles.
In this lecture, I will give a brief introduction to MapReduce and YANG. MapReduce is the most famous and classical computing framework for batch processing and offline processing in the big data field. While YANG is pretty young but important as well. YANG is used for resource management. After learning this chapter, you will enter in computing and resource management field. Before we learn the main lecture, let's have a look at the objectives of our course. You will get to know the concept of MapReduce and YANG, as well as the application scenarios and principles of MapReduce. Besides, you will learn functions and architectures of MapReduce and YANG, and also get to know some new features of YANG. Let's take a look at the introduction to MapReduce and YANG. MapReduce is developed based on the paper issued by Google and is used for parallel computing of a massive dataset. Here, the dataset shall be larger than 1 trillion byte. Okay, from the definition, we know that MapReduce is a computing platform. Actually, it's a parallel computing platform with high performance based on clusters. We have learned HDFS is a distributed file system for data storage. Here, MapReduce just uses the stored data to do computing. Both of them work in parallel. Working in parallel is the key point for big data. Some developers don't know parallel programming languages, but they need to do computation in parallel. Thus, MapReduce comes up to help them. MapReduce is a package of distributed programming language, very easy to use. MapReduce has several properties as follows. Firstly, easy to program. As what I said, the programmers only need to tell MapReduce what to do and leave the rest to Hadoop. Secondly, outstanding scalability. When computing power doesn't meet our requests, we just need to add more cluster nodes and expand it horizontally. The more servers in the cluster, the better performance it has. It's easy to scale data processing over multiple computing nodes. Then, high fault tolerance is another feature of MapReduce. If one node in the cluster fails, the task on it will be transferred to another node by computer migration or data migration to ensure all tasks can be executed successfully. Thus, MapReduce has high safety. In a word, the MapReduce is a classical and powerful computing engine in Hadoop ecosystem. Let's see the next. YANG. What is YANG and why do we need it? With the repeat development of big data analysis, more diversified distributed programming paradigms are required, such as real-time data processing, memory computing, and graph computing. The diversity of programming paradigms poses a greater challenge to the runtime environment. That is, the runtime environment needs to be more universal to support different programming models instead of only supporting the MapReduce programming diagrams, like the MapReduce framework. Different programming paradigms or different computing tasks have various requirements on sources, such as CPU and memory. Therefore, an excellent scheduling policy is required to maximize resource utilization while meeting special requirements of applications. In addition, tasks need to be isolated to avoid mutual impact. That is why we need YANG. YANG stands for Yet Another Resource Negotiator. The full name tells us two main things. Firstly, YANG manages resources allocation, providing resource management and scheduling for upper layer applications. Secondly, there is another resource negotiator before YANG, but it has many limitations and not used anymore. There was no YANG in Hadoop version 1.0, but only the HDFS for data storage and MapReduce for offline computing. Compared with MRV1, Yang has better compatibility, higher level of integration, and lower operation and maintenance cost. And Yang also makes it easier to share data among different computing platforms. All in all, Yang is a lightweight resource management system that supports Spark, Storm frameworks, and MapReduce. Multiple frameworks are managed on a unified basis and share cluster resources. It has various features such as high resource utilization, low OM cost, and easy data sharing. You might be curious how Huawei uses these two frameworks, MapReduce and Yang. Let's have a look at the figure. Last time we mentioned HDFS as a foundation. Right upon is Yang, responsible for resource arrangement. Then we can find that MapReduce is above Yang, together with Storm, Spark, Flink, and other components. Well, MapReduce is the first one among them, and it can do offline computation tasks rather than real-time calculation. All of these are different kinds of computing platforms and data warehouse tools, for which Yang could provide unified resources management. Administrators do not need to maintain Resource Manager for each computing engine. They only need to maintain Yang, which reduces the operation and maintenance cost. Besides, the whole cluster shares the resources so that they can be highly used.
In this section, we gave a brief introduction to both Yang and MapReduce. Next part, we will focus on functions and architectures of MapReduce.